and I also hope that you had an amazing day so far. All right, so today we will be doing a high school lesson or a high school English lesson on research writing. So it is basically for high school students or high school learners, but we are going to log into our aplusstudents.ca. Once we log into aplusstudents.ca, and then we are going to grade 9 because that is where we will get the lesson. So we're going to log in to aplusstudents.ca with our login details, username as well as password. We're going to select language arts and we're going to go to grade 9, right? Once we are in grade 9, we are going to scroll down up until we get to the chapter of research writing. All right. So once we are on the chapter of research writing, in grade 9 specifically, right? We are now going to focus on the lessons of identifying plagiarism, recognizing the parts of a works cited entry, which is the MLA 7th edition, to understand a works cited entry, and to use in-text citations with MLA format. All right. Because remember, when we do, you're going to be doing a lot of research writing, and part of research writing is knowing basically what to avoid. It's knowing what to avoid and also how to properly format and write a research paper, specifically when we are writing essays and when we are citing or taking anything from the internet. All right. So now we are going into the first one, which is to identify plagiarism. So with research writing, hey, we can easily fall victim to plagiarism, right? And plagiarism is an act of taking another person's work or ideas and presenting them as your own, right? Meaning that we go to the internet and the topic is, for example, COVID-19 in 2020. And then we go on the internet, research COVID-19 2020, and we literally take the work or ideas of the authors or writers as is, where we copy and we paste it and we make it as our own. So we call that plagiarism, right? Because plagiarism is the act of taking another person's work or ideas and presenting them as your own. You either do it accidentally, right? Or you can do it on purpose. We do it on purpose by copying and pasting, right? So you copy something from the internet and you paste it as your own. You just format some of the line spacing and the font size and so on, but you copy and paste it. Or you can do it accidentally. Accidentally is where you basically you try to cite it in a way or in a manner to make it seem as it's your own, but yet it does pick up some parts or some forms of plagiarism, right? And that is why we call it, it can be accidentally, right? Because you did not do it on purpose. Your intentions was not to basically take somebody else's work and make it as your own. It's just that the insight citations or the in-text referencing or the way you reference it or the way you summarize it did not come across as much as your own. But if we plagiarize or use somebody else's work or ideas on purpose, that is usually when we copy and paste um, work from the internet, or we directly write something from a book, type it out as our own, and then we basically present that as work that we have basically prepared. So when you use an outside source in your writing, so when you use an outside source in your own writing, you should make sure to cite the source in order to avoid plagiarism. Meaning that if we go on the internet, right, and we are now citing any source, we are citing Vygotsky or we are citing fraud, and then we need to then basically have our specific sources in order to avoid plagiarism, to clearly give the reader the understanding that this is where I got my information from, right? And that is why we say that we have accidental plagiarism and we have plagiarism that is on purpose, right? So your references or your sources that shows that this is where I get it, right? So now you maybe sometimes write it as your own. We will maybe see it as, oh, okay, it is probably accidental, right? Because the sources are there. But some people do not give any sources at all. It is just copied and pasted as is. No sources. We don't know where you got it from, nothing. So when you use outside source in your own writing, you should make sure to cite the source in order to avoid plagiarism, right? And we will also later on learn about in-text referencing, right? And that comes part of citing the source in order to avoid plagiarism. And remember, we said plagiarism, it's the act of taking another person's work or ideas and presenting them as your own, whether it is accidentally or on purpose, right? And as you can hear, even ideas, look at the word ideas, right? Remember, this is not just in a on the internet writing an essay point, right? Even if you are having discussions and you are stealing somebody else's ideas, right? That can also be a form of plagiarism, right? All right. So when we cite sources, especially outside sources, right, we do avoid plagiarism, right? Because that will give the reader clear understanding of where this person got the information from. So we then need to consider the following sources, right? So here is maybe an example. Let's go for the example. Here's an example of a source, right? Meaning that we write the names of, or basically the surnames of the people that wrote the article, whether it is one person or whether it is more than one person, right? So we then, you first write down the name or basically the surname of the people or person that wrote the article or the book, right? You also need to put down the name of the book or name of the article or name of the link, even, right? So, for example, we say searching for explanations how the internet inflates estimates of internal knowledge, right? And then you also say where this book. So, this book is a copyright 2015 by the American Psychological Association. So that is but an example, right? So now, once you research, because you basically typed in, for example, how the internet inflates estimates of internal knowledge, the information will basically pop up, right? It will basically show how the results of these experiments suggest that searching the internet may cause a systematical failure to recognize the extent to which we rely on outside source knowledge, right? Because we do need the outside source, outsourced knowledge. And where do we find many outsourced knowledge? On the internet. Because it's broad. It's basically everybody's ideas. People add their ideas almost every single day. Articles, journal entries, right, are basically added onto or uploaded onto the internet in order to expand our knowledge. So we do rely on outsourced knowledge specifically from the internet in order to expand our forms of knowledge also, or for us to know more. A good example was COVID-19, right? When COVID-19 happened, immediately that specific year, even people started uploading. You could go to the internet and research what COVID-19 is. That was the outsourced knowledge. So instead of just hearing this is what it is, that is what it is, missing the news, not watching the news, you forgot to, like for example, switch on the television by 7 o'clock, for example, you can just go on the internet any time of the day, and there will basically be information about anything, specifically COVID-19. So searching for explanations on the internet inflates self-assessed knowledge in unrelated domains, which means that the more we search on the internet for specific topics, right, we also get, that's basically self knowledge that we are gaining, right? We are expanding our knowledge, expanding our horizon also. And like I was saying, that there are thousands of people who are uploading and updating and upgrading even the meanings of certain things. If we need to talk about anything related, we just go on the internet, type in whatever we want to, and then the internet will basically, that information will pop up. So it's the outsourced knowledge, right? Where we can then self-assess and be like, I have learned something. All right. So when you write a research paper, right, or an essay, especially since you need to get information from the internet, right? Then you can either take something from the internet and then you can summarize whatever the person was saying, right? And then you put the source specifically there. Or you can do a direct quotation, and a direct quotation, you need to use quotation marks. So if you use a direct quotation in your writing, you must use quotation marks around the exact words that were copied from the source, because it will clearly give you an indication, or the read an indication, that this is not my word, my words. These are the words that I got on the internet on page 15 in the whichever text, right? And that is what we mean when we say about plagiarism and accidental plagiarism, and we have intentional or purpose, or plagiarism that is what that was on purpose. So if you take something directly from the internet without direct quotations or without quotations, then we will see that that is you plagiarizing on purpose. But if you show your direct quotation, then and sometimes it's still not properly in text, right? And then we can maybe see it as an accidental plagiarism if they pick up some poems or so, some parts of the of plagiarism, right? Where you take work that is not your own. All right, so when we do direct quotations, right, we say that you need to put a quotation mark around the exact words that were copied from the source, right? And this is also an addition to citing the source. So you can cite the source, yes. But if you take the words, whether it is one line or two lines or a few words from um, directly from the internet and you make it as your own, you need to put the quotation marks around that, right? And here is an example of it. So now I'm going to give you an example of a plagiarized text when it comes to quotation marks and a text that is not plagiarized. So over here, if we look at this text, it says researchers have found that relying on the internet for information may cause. So now the underlined is basically the words that were directly taken from the internet, right? And as you can see, there's no quotation marks. So researchers have found that relying on the internet for information may cause a systematic failure to recognize the extent to which we rely on outsourced knowledge. No quotation marks over there, which means that this is plagiarized. So we call this plagiarism. So this sentence is plagiarized because it uses the source's exact words. If you use the source's exact words without quotation marks, then it is called plagiarism. Or if you did not cite it properly, it is called plagiarism. Because you can take the information from the internet, you then need to cite it in a manner in which you summarize and then still write it as your own, right? Meaning that you're summarizing it, you are writing, it's almost like you are paraphrasing it, right? Then it means that, this is his own. But if you take it directly from the internet, no quotation mark, right? Citing it properly, we will see it as plagiarism. So, in order for you to properly direct quote, direct quote something, or to use the direct quotation marks, here is an example. It says, researchers have found that relying on the internet for information may cause, you see, open inverted commas, right? Or open quotation marks, sorry, may cause a systematic failure to recognize the extent to which we rely on outside knowledge. And we closed the quotation marks, right? Now, once you have closed the quotation marks, you then also need to say who wrote it. Sometimes they'll even ask you to put the page number, but of course, with most times it is just on the internet. So you basically just have to say that once you close the quotation mark and then next to it you put the authors or the people that wrote the articles, right? Because remember, if you don't do it right, it's going to be seen as you are plagiarizing. You're taking work and making it as your own, right? And that is called plagiarism. Using somebody else's words or ideas and making it into your own. So if you plagiarize or paraphrase, sorry, if you paraphrase a source, remember I said that you can either do direct quotation or you need to cite the source properly, right? So if you paraphrase a source or put sources' ideas into your own words, you must still cite the source. So as much as you took the word from the words, the work or the words from the internet, right? You paraphrase the source, right? You are summarizing it. You are putting the source's idea into your own words. You still need to write down or you need to cite the source. So even though you put it in your own words and paraphrase it, you put it in bracket and you put down the names of the authors or the writers. So even if you properly cited it to the T and we don't pick up any forms of plagiarism maybe, or words that is directly taken, you still have to cite the sources because we need to know that this is whoever's work that you basically paraphrased, right? So even if you properly cited or paraphrased or a paraphrase that is too similar to a source in wording or sentence structure is still considered plagiarism. So rather put down the names of the people who wrote the articles. And here we have a few examples. All right. Let's go back to the next one. All right, so that was identifying plagiarism. And we said that with plagiarism, plagiarism is when you take somebody else's words or ideas directly, right, from the internet and you make it as your own. So now we're going on to the next one where we recognize the parts of a work cited entry, which is the MLA 7th edition. This now comes with us having to write the cite. So basically citing first before we write the reference list. Remember we mentioned that you need to cite the sources when you either paraphrase or you are writing down anything from the internet or from a book or an article or anything, right? So, in order to avoid plagiarism, you need to cite it properly. You need to paraphrase it properly, right? And you need to put the sources there. And here are examples. If you get information from a book, then here we have the format. If you took work from an essay, short stories, or poems in an anthology or book, then this is how you can cite or paraphrase. Not paraphrase, cite the source. Magazines or newspaper articles, this is how you can cite the source. Journal articles, there you have it. and then any other web pages, just like that. All right, then some additional guidelines, right, when it comes to writing, paraphrasing, citing sources, and besides, we want to avoid plagiarism, right? You need to write the author's names, right? The first author's name is written in last name, meaning we write the surname, right? First name format, for example, Smith Jane. And then we have additional author names are written in the first name, last name forward. So some authors or some forms of citations, or the way you write references, they will either add the name and the surname, or some will just add the surname and the initial, right? Or just the surname. But then you need to know what type of referencing you are using. All right. All right. So we identify plagiarism. We recognize the parts of a works cited entry. And now we're going to understanding the work cited entry. And before we continue, so we are in the chapter of research writing, high school, right? And part of research, right, is knowing your concept, knowing your solution, your ideas, your goals, your forms of communication strategies, right? Your market, right? Sometimes question is depending on what you're doing or the researching things that you're doing. The vision, the mission, development analysis, and the aim and your target, right? Those are the things that you need to consider when you are researching. Once again, plagiarism is taking someone else's work or words or ideas and passing them off as your own, and without attributions to the original creator, right? And for us to avoid plagiarism, we need to write it from scratch, use quotation marks where quotation marks are due, paraphrase and summarize, provide complete citations, know when to cite and keep the tabs on sources, know the types of plagiarism, use the plagiarism checker, and we can even seek advice from professors. That is all of the things to avoid plagiarism. All right. So we already said plagiarism is when you are taking someone else's work, words, or ideas and making it as your own, right? We then have deliberate plagiarism, which is on purpose, or we have accidental plagiarism, right? We mentioned accidental, which is purpose, as well as deliberate um, plagiarism. All right. So, with deliberate plagiarism, right, you are rewriting from books or articles, right? You are literally copying and pasting from the web pages and online sources to basically create a patchwork writing, right? Meaning you just want to make it seem as if you did it all, right? But the internet did. Buying, downloading, or borrowing a paper, right? You need to avoid. So use that as guidelines to avoid getting off or avoid plagiarizing. Then we have accidental plagiarism. It's not knowing when and how to cite, right? So you are actually having trouble, but you are trying to summarize it. You are trying to make it as your own, right? You are trying to cite the sources, but it's just that you don't know when or how to cite. Not knowing how to paraphrase or summarize. All right, so accidental plagiarism. So we said it is not knowing when and how to cite, right? Not knowing how to paraphrase or summarize, and not knowing what common knowledge is recycling an old paper. Recycling an old paper is literally you taking somebody else's work and you're going to hand it in as your own, right? All right, so we went into identifying plagiarism. We recognize the parts of a work's cited entry. And now we're going to understand a works cited entry, MLA 7th edition or edition. So basically, what does this work cited entry indicate about cited work, right? Work that you need to cite in order to avoid plagiarism, right? So when we're writing a research paper, you will often be asked to follow a particular style guide for your citations. So you get different types of style guides, right? You get the Harvard style, the APA style, and so on, right? But you need to know the type of style that you're working with, and you need to write it in its order, right? So when writing a research paper, you will often be asked to follow a particular style guide for your citations. One popular style guide is the Modern Language Association. So the MLA handbook is called the Modern Language Association, right? So if they ask you to cite from the Model Language Association, which is the MLA 7th edition, then it means that you need to follow their ways of writing or their guideline, right? And here is basic formats. We have books, and as I'm scrolling down, it basically just gives us examples of how to quote, format examples for books, for essays, short stories, poems in an anthology, in an anthology or book, right? There we also have the format and the example. Magazines, because yes, you can quote from a magazine and a newspaper, but you need to properly cite it. Journal articles is nowadays the biggest in which people are citing from instead of books, right? They are now browsing the internet and looking for information on specific articles. Web pages, right? Right? And that is just a few. They're saying that in addition to the guidelines, right? The author's name, the first author's name is written in the last name, right? Then we have medium publications, editors, translators, missing information. All right. So far we have identified plagiarism, where you are taking work, ideas, or words and making it as your own. We spoke about recognizing the parts of the work cited entry level. We spoke about citing, um, paraphrasing certain words, and then we also spoke about purpose or on purpose plagiarism, and then we also have accidental plagiarism. So now, how do we use in-text citations with MLA format, right? So when we are writing a research paper, you will often be asked to follow particular style guides for your citations, right? And one popular style guide is the MLA 7th edition, which we call the Modern Language Association Handbook, right? And the MLA style of citation involves two parts, which is an in-text citation and a works cited page, right? The in-text citation cites the source and points to a more detailed entries in the works cited handbook or cited page. We usually the in-text citation consists of the author's last name and the page numbers enclosed in parentheses, for example, and the citation should go immediately after the cited text, before any commas, or the new program has been cited for its ineffectiveness whenever. We also spoke about quotation marks. And remember, when you are taking words from the internet, right? You're taking words from the internet, you need to, if it's directly, you need quotation marks, right? And quotation marks and exclamation points that are not part of the quotation should go after the citation. Yes. So we said question marks and citation and exclamation points that are not part of the quotation should go after the citation. Then you either put the question mark, full stop, exclamation mark, and so on. Right? And question marks and exclamation points that are part of the quotation should appear within the quotation mark, right? And the citation and additional end punctuation should follow. Meaning if you had a question that you are taking from the internet If that question mark is within or part of the sentence that you quoted, then we put the question mark inside of the quotation marks. But if it is just an additional endpoint that you are putting there, which is either a full stop or you are just putting a question mark, because remember, you are paraphrasing, you are citing it in your own words, right? Then definitely you need to put your quotation marks, right? So question marks and exclamation points that are part of the quotation should appear within the quotation marks. Sorry for repeating that. And an example of that is, why should we trust these results, right? This is directly taken from the internet, right? Which is why should we trust these results? So this is now how you basically show that you are now putting the direct quotation within the quotation marks. But if it was just a either question mark or an exclamation point or something that you added afterwards, then you put it outside of the bracket. For example, like here. So quotation marks and exclamation points that are not part of the quotation should go after the citation, like this. Ineffective at best. There we have it. And that is now after you have cited the source, which is the surname plus the page number. But if the question mark, exclamation point is within the quotation, then you put it in front. You put it within the quotation and you put the author or the writer as well as the page number in bracket outside of that quotation mark or quotation, if that's the word, quotation, or the cited quotation, right? All right, so basically, this is just a few pointers when it comes to research writing. And remember, you are basically going to be doing a lot of research writing from grade 8 up until let's say grade 12, and then college and university, right? And in order for you to write a proper research paper or essay, right, there are certain things that you need to follow, right? Because you are going to be asked to get information from the internet. You are going to be asked to research work, and you are definitely going to get it from the internet, from books, from articles, right? So you need to know what to do, how to research, how to also write a paper in order to write a constructive paper without being criticized for it, right? Criticize or not criticize or critic for it, specifically if you are stealing words that is not your own. So we need to avoid plagiarism, right? By knowing how to cite, knowing how to paraphrase, and knowing how to cite sources, right? That is identifying or knowing how to actually avoid plagiarism in general, right? So we did speak about on purpose plagiarism as well as accidental plagiarism. Accidental plagiarism is basically just where you cite the sources, but it's just that you don't know how to properly cite it, you know, or you don't know how to properly paraphrase it. That is an accidental plagiarism that can be bypassed. But as soon as you copy and paste work from the internet onto your own, that is called plagiarizing on purpose, right? Which means that you are not directly stealing work, ideas, as well as words from a different writer, right? Taking words that does not belong to you or that is not yours and writing it as your own. So that is basically plagiarism where you're doing it on purpose. All right, so basically, that is it for our research writing, right? Let us just try and follow whatever the steps and the guidelines that was presented today. Avoid plagiarism, try to cite, try to quote, try to write down quotation marks properly, paraphrase, right, in order to not make it seem as if words or work was taken on purpose and made or written into your own. All right, so basically, that is the end of our lesson on research writing. I really hope that you have a good evening further. Good night.